is being live streamed. All right. Do I need to hit record? Let's call to the crowd. All right. Hello there. I am Adam Gower, founder of gowercrowd.com and host of the real estate reality show at youtube.com/gowercrowd and on good podcasts everywhere. Welcome to this week's real estate reality show weekly news roundup with my guest, Dave Saxe, who is managing principal at Calvera Partners. Each week, Dave and I look at three of the top stories dominating the news in the prior week. And this week, we're going to be discussing number one, the urban doom loop. Number two, New Deal headlines. Open for funding, 24% IRR. You've got to be kidding. And number three, increasing signals that even multifamily is in peril. Now, all of these headlines are actually covered in news articles. And by the end of the day, all being well today, I will go ahead and put all the links up on YouTube and on the website at gowercrowd.com. So you'll be able to read the articles, the actual articles themselves. If you'd like to learn more about Dave and Calvera Partners or about real estate syndication or crowdfunding in general, visit the podcast page at gowercrowd.com. While you're there, be sure to subscribe to our newsletter. You'll get updates on real estate syndication, crowdfunding, what's going on in commercial real estate every week. You can always unsubscribe. Now, the show is being broadcast today live on YouTube, and I can actually see my face over here, which is incredibly distracting. But I also see the comments here. Oh, here we go. Comments are not supported on private videos. Oh, what a bummer. All right, so you can't comment. But anyway, we'll try and figure something out for future weeks. But after the show, go ahead and put comments in the YouTube comment box there, and either Dave or I or both of us will get back to you. All right, let's get on with it. Dave, so our first topic today, right, and you're in the perfect place for this, aren't you, is the urban doom loop. We saw these headlines actually in an article in Forbes. The headline was, "For commercial real estate investors, quote, urban doom loop, unquote, is both crisis and opportunity." And one of the things that I'm going to read one of the lines here. Many reasons to leave. The Forbes article said, there are many reasons to leave major U.S. cities, surging violent crime, failing schools, climbing taxes, soaring housing costs, and a sidewalk occupying army of homelessness. Oh my goodness me. Well, and we've talked about this before, but it certainly seems to be a spiral, doesn't it, Dave?
Absolutely. Yeah, as we've mentioned on previous episodes, I'm here in downtown San Francisco right now in an office building as we speak. Can get into this more later, but outside, I pretty much see everything that you just mentioned. Now, I'm one of the few people that's willing to brave it here and come into an office, but a lot of my network and other folks working remotely, working from other cities, working from the suburbs, working from the peninsula where the weather's even nicer. There's a lot of reasons not to be where I am right now.
Well, and what's causing what Forbes was talking about was that, this doom loop that as offices fall empty, taxes go down, traffic declines, restaurants don't get occupied, hotels aren't occupied, parking lots seems trivial, but revenues from parking lots go down, and it just creates this. It's not a virtuous cycle. What is it? What's the opposite of virtuous? Like this declining cycle of revenues for the cities as well.
Absolutely. So you touched on a lot of the important items here, but if people stop coming to office buildings go down in value, property taxes go down in value. The cities then have fewer resources and funds to provide the services needed to keep the downtowns up and running. Then you have the hotels that go empty. So then you lose the hotel and occupancy tax. Again, a major bummer. And then if you have a city that doesn't have a lot of mixed use in its downtown area, there's also not even a reason to come there in general. So then all the small businesses, which is really unfortunate, start to go. And then on top of that, you have everything you started this podcast today with already, which was the crime and everything else going on, thus leading to the doom loop.
And what is the motivation anyway? I mean, I was living in LA, as you know, for 3 years, up until recently. And from where I was, the drive to downtown was 10 miles. It could take anything from 30 minutes with, at 3 a.m. in the morning with no traffic, basically all the lights you got to stop at, to an hour to drive down there for what? And then you got to struggle for parking. And then you got to battle with all these issues downtown. It's really disincentivizing as these cities get worse.
Yeah, the concerning part, though, LA, having lived in LA myself for a few years, I totally get the commutes. What's concerning here is that we don't really have that issue here. So prior to the pandemic, people were taking public transportation. Buses. I take one of these electric scooters that I bought. I'm 12 minutes door to door without having to get into public transportation. And I find it fantastic and I love doing it. But it's really a problem and concerning when folks in San Francisco, which does rely on public transportation, they're just making that choice that even though it's easy to do, they're not doing it anymore. And so public transportation is rumored here in the San Francisco to be going under if we don't save that.
As I mentioned before we started today, we have a client in Florida, an office client. They own, huge sky rises across the western side. Is that right? And I think, the western seaboard of Florida. And their occupancy rates are extremely high. Rents are going up. Tenants are holding back on size. But if a building is properly amenitized, that market is on fire. It is absolute. It's when I hear them talking, I talk about anybody really in Florida, but especially in office where there's such a contrast. It seems like they're talking about either a different world or a different era. It's like, wait a minute, where are you actually?
That's really true.
There's so much immigration to Florida, people fleeing, these cities. I'm going to say I got off. Try not to be too negative. In fact, I just got off a call with somebody who's looking to invest actually in Florida, and he sent me an email afterwards apologizing for dissing LA as much as he did. But one of his comments was, he said the political environment there, and I'm not being political, the political environment in LA is, you know what, we don't care. We want the rich to leave, and then we'll share what's left amongst, all the workers. And it's just creating, I mean, LA has the potential to be one of the most attractive, has everything to be one of, perhaps the most attractive destination in America, and yet it is far from it.
I guess I am encouraged to just swing it a little bit more optimistically. Here is that the political winds are changing. I think the residents are realizing that this isn't sustainable. We are in a doom loop. And one thing to watch out for will be, the next mayoral election for supervisors, district supervisors. My gut tells me you're going to see some movement away from what you've seen in San Francisco in the past, because people are fed up at this point.
Now let's this other story, big story this week, of course, is the impending bankruptcy of WeWork. They haven't gone bankrupt yet, have they? So this is from The Real Deal, and I should actually let them know that I'm going to recommend that you do sign up for The Real Deal as well. It's actually
great really publication. They just reached out to me about some advertising.
They taught their article, WeWork bankruptcy would ripple across the real estate industry. Now, you're in a WeWork, aren't you? And
I am. As we speak, I am a WeWork supporter for my own purposes. I didn't say the financial model works. I am, as we speak, in a building here in Embarcadero Center, downtown San Francisco, in one of the towers. There's 4 of them. A lot of the floors here are occupied by WeWork. And when I say occupied, there's WeWork built out space. That doesn't mean people are actually in the space. I am sitting here. I'm not going to unblur my screen, but I would call this what we used to call an equity office, a see-through office building. What that means is that I can see all the way through behind me to the windows because none of the offices are occupied. I can tell you that I believe everything I'm reading in that article because I've noticed myself having renegotiated my lease on my private office here. I'm one of the few that's still doing private offices where WeWork makes all their money. Most people are using the common areas, but the issue for WeWork is that is much cheaper per month. And all the prime real estate around the edges of the floors here are built out offices that are completely sitting vacant. So there's no way the business model can work.
You know what's interesting actually? It's I'm just going to take notes here versus suburban. So WeWork are located in all of these major downtown, exactly the kind of downtown major city areas that we've been talking are going into doom loops. Not all of them, but New York, LA, I think, San Francisco, and others. And these are the places that people are avoiding. But I also worked in a shared office environment, it's like a big open warehouse. It was actually an incubator at a university. So I was surrounded by students. And I found it one of the most stimulating, interesting, high energy environments to work in. I could be doing this in that incubator. And I didn't have an office. I had a dedicated desk. So I was out, with the masses, but I had my own space in the open area. And I could be doing this live call with you. And there's a buzz of noise going on around. Nobody really cares. Everyone, here if they want to. But it is a high energy and actually high learning environment because people hear you say stuff and they come over and say, have you tried this? Why don't you try that? It's a model that with remote work, I think is better suited to suburban locations actually than it is to downtowns.
You're 100% correct. So I should have mentioned that when I'm not doing podcast Zooms, I do sit in the common area because I'm absolutely stimulated by the energy. I should mention, if I did not, that the common area is fairly crowded. I will mention again, though, that that's usually only Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Today, it is a ghost town in the common area here in the downtown office building. But I would say this model was perfect for remote work, as you said. I just wish they had built out more of the space because we would have known a pandemic was coming for more of the shared space rather than spending these huge TI dollars to build out all these offices around me. I don't know where they get the cash to switch the build outs and the models without some sort of bankruptcy event or cash infusion.
Look, when you're working remotely, this great migration, everyone's moving around across the country to find cheaper housing, better living standards. We all learned that we can work remotely using Zoom or whatever you actually use, but it's not ideal to work out of the house. I mean, I'm lucky that I have this study that's kind of remote from the rest of the house, so I can't hear what's going on. They can't hear me, and it is isolated. But there's nothing nicer, even in a small town like that we live in, than actually going somewhere where there is that energy. And so I actually think that there is a strong case for the WeWork model, maybe not the financial model, but the general thesis.
Oh, for sure.
Shared spaces outside of downtowns.
I love this. I would do this for the rest of my working life if I could. And to your point on the suburbs, or in our case, down in Silicon Valley, those WeWorks are more crowded for the reasons that you mentioned. I've been going down more, for example, at Menlo Park, where Facebook's located, because I love the scene down there. They've got the great weather and less of the problems that San Francisco has. So I'm sitting here in a unique situation in a downtown building. And then one last point I'll make is that the guys at the front desk, they've kind of moved that into the common areas. So I heard them talking this morning about the situation with WeWork, little firsthand inside knowledge here. And they claimed that the offices around me are actually leased, but no one's using them. But more importantly, they said I heard them say, of all the cities in the country, downtown San Francisco is in the biggest challenge, is having the biggest challenges for WeWork, and who knows what happens here with our locations.
I do think it's a model that's going to work. And the reason that we brought it up actually is that Cranes, actually, where was this article? It was another article, maybe it actually was in the Real Deal article. Cranes reported that WeWork occupies 6.4 million square feet in Manhattan alone.
Exactly.
With Boston, and they listed all of, I think, so the idea of them going bankrupt is just going to add
this is scary
fuel to the fire of the doom loop of some of
really scary stuff. We've already, you said it, where they occupy some of the prime real estate and some of the prime, even suburban, although I agree with you, that'll be more crowded. If they have an issue here, the percentage of the office space they have is not insignificant. And I don't know what that's going to look like, honestly. And it could make this whole office situation from a real commercial real estate investment perspective a lot crazier going forward.
Let's move on to our next topic. And the next topic is actually, we're going to start with two things. When I sent you the list of articles, first one was that we are beginning to see distressed deals actually coming onto the market. There was this one deal, equity multiple, put on their website, closing in 48 hours, distressed acquisition opportunity. So these things are finally beginning to come to the forefront slowly. And this was at least one of the first that is overtly distressed, actually a sale of a note on the equity multiple website. But the one that really picked both of it, really prompted both yours and my attention here, I'm going to use names, what the heck, right? Mm-hmm. Realty Mogul put out a new now open for funding. You got to love this. 24% target IRR in Dallas. All right, maybe it's Dallas, whatever. What? You've got to be kidding, right? Like, isn't this the whole problem? It's almost like clickbait to have such high IRRs.
Well, it is, and you're the foremost expert here on this space, and can dig into that a little bit more later on what is crowdfunding. But I had the same reaction to you. I got the same email. I've said on previous episodes, I've had conversations with all of the crowdfunding sites. I don't need to even be specific about which ones. It's all of them. Going back many years, and I was always taken aback by, I was overtly told, if your IRR is not at this level, we can't sell this deal. And so I would tell my business partners, this model is not sustainable. And as soon as the market turns, you're going to see some problems. So what's scary to me is, even after what we just saw happen with CrowdStreet, I was pretty shocked to see a 20+% IRR deal in Dallas, given that right now we're acquiring something in Fort Worth and our projected net IRR to investors is 13.
Right,
and that's the co-invest with better terms, and it's 11 with, so something doesn't add up when you aren't reasonable with your assumptions.
Well, that's right. And that's, again, we talked about this last week, is this what I call the crowdfunding paradox. And the paradox is that investors, I actually had an investor, GoWCrowd held an live investor call yesterday. We had a couple dozen investors show up who have invested, in some cases, dozens of times, individuals who have invested dozens of times, both directly with sponsors and also on the platforms. And so it's very interesting to actually hear their thoughts and their comments and their concerns. And actually, we should talk about this. Here we go. This was part of this whole discussion on crowdfunding. That it's so tempting to be drawn. It's like to be drawn to these high IRRs and to just continue this narrative that, the only way to sell real estate in the online syndication world, quote, crowdfunding, is to advertise what you and I know potentially. Look, who knows? Maybe this deal is.
Yeah, well, exactly right. We should say, but
we got to be careful. It might be a really conservative 24 IRR, but
my training would say that's a whole other conversation.
It is. Yeah. We've got to have provisos, and we don't want to diss it or whatever, Right. I'm sure it makes a lot of sense. But still, it seems, I don't know, it just seems out of alignment with what people are feeling and thinking at the moment.
In this environment. I've talked to investors about Dallas and Fort Worth this morning, and they all buy into the market using that as an example. But there's so much concern about the broader environment and mitigating your risks and being conservative. And they would rather have somebody like me massively outperform than to go in there telling them that I'm going to get the 20. And we do outperform, but I don't need to quote unquote sell it to. I have real experienced investors that look at my IRR and say, you're being reasonable.
Yeah, and look at your assumptions and your underwriting and understand why you got to this number, and that it's presumably a prudent assumption that you're making, and not just something to attract investors. In fact, sophisticated investors see that kind of thing if you dive into it, and it blows up your credibility. If you know what I mean. Again, it's got to be careful, because maybe it's actually a really conservative 24% IRR. But the basic idea, right? But here's the other thing. I mean, it actually speaks to one thing that did come up substantially during my investor call yesterday, where we invited active accredited investors just to open confidential conversation. And also what I see with sponsors, what we do is we build marketing platforms for sponsors so they can raise money. And the number one challenge that sponsors have these days is communication and understanding really how to communicate. In fact, this comes out in another article. This one was in Crowdfund. It's interesting. It's the article I've got here is actually from Crowdfund Insider, but it's actually a Wall Street Journal report. CrowdStreet comments on a critical Wall Street Journal report saying represents an incomplete view of deal performance. It's all about communication today.
It always has been. When you're managing other folks' capital, particularly, in my case, it can be people all over San Francisco, friends, family, people I see and know all the time. What I've always been told is if you don't hear a lot from people, in my case, it's because I'm communicating well and being transparent. They're generally comfortable with what I'm doing. But particularly when you're dealing with folks that don't know who you are, that may not be as sophisticated, that were drawn in by the IRRs, you need to be being as transparent as possible. If there's an issue, you get out in front of it,
right?
Tell people what you're doing about it, particularly during a downward cycle. You have to. You got to do the right legal work. You got to do the right compliance work. There's just so many complications to doing real estate deals effectively. Many things can go wrong. You've got to have the systems in place to execute it effectively.
So why do you think it is that sponsors do go quiet when times get rough? I mean, I have my own thesis, but I'd be interested in hearing yours.
When you asked me that question, my first response was, I would never do that. So I'm trying to put myself in the perspective of somebody that would in this case. It could be anything from, if you don't talk about it, you're kind of just putting your head in the sand and you're hoping that you can keep kicking the can down the road, yes, and eventually it'll fix itself. For example, in office here, if I can just hold on, it'll fix. That would be my theory. Yeah, I think clearly that doesn't happen all the time.
I think you're right. Again, I've unfortunately, at the very, very beginning of my career, I was at 100 years ago, I was at a sponsor that collapsed basically. Mm-hmm. And I think that so I've seen it from the inside, and then also when I was during the last downturn, dealt with hundreds of sponsors when I was dealing with non-performing loans. Yep. I think two things going on. I think you're quite right. One of them is, we don't want to share bad news. And it's not that they're not working hard to resolve whatever challenges that. But one, it's a distraction at any time to talk to an investor, right? You got to go through the fundraising. Once you got the money, it's like, all right, we don't need to deal with them anymore. Right, because we got to get on with the job. So it's a distraction of time, but it's also because you don't want to be presenting bad news. Maybe something you say could be held against you in evidence, right? So you better be quiet. And then the other thing is, if you're working on a solution, there's always this idea that once we've got the solution, then we can communicate how we solved it, rather than how are we working to solve these problems. And there may be also the idea that if you do, I don't know, maybe if you're working to solve it, maybe it would cause more problems, right? By speaking ahead of the curve or going a little bit beyond where you are today and anticipating some, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we're based here in the Bay Area. We have, we're not in distress, but we clearly have some legacy, smaller, older, apartment buildings down in Silicon Valley that have been really challenging for a lot of reasons. We don't have to go into them now. And so you have to communicate with your investors that you're acknowledging the issues, that you are actively trying different things to solve it, that you're being proactive and you're being realistic and telling them what the long-term plan is. And that goes a long way. And I've seen people that may let's just say, are just invested in that one building that's struggling, because you do those things, would still take a flyer on you for your next offering because Absolutely. They love the way you execute.
Yeah, that's right. You can misinterpret silence so negatively. It makes more sense to not be silent, right? But with your investors. Let's move on to the last topic. And that is the increasing signals that even multifamily is in peril. Wall Street Journal, their headline on the 7th of August, a real estate haven, multifamily, turns perilous with roughly $1 trillion coming due. You're in the multifamily space. What's going on with multifamily?
Yeah, that's all we do. People always think, oh, it's just going to be office, as we've been talked about, or retail, or at hotels. At one point, obviously, we're struggling during the pandemic, but we're hearing anecdotally, seeing distressed deals come out, even in hot markets like Texas. We've talked about that on previous episodes, and you said it. Usually, right now, a lot of these issues are debt driven, loans that may have floating rate. Loans that, obviously the interest rate popped. You have valuations that have fallen 20 to 25% in some markets, so people cannot refinance those loans out, or they can't make their loan payments because the floating rate has gone up so much that the cash flow is negative. They may have a high octane bridge loan on top of a senior loan. So while it may not be the clickbaity, or not clickbaity, it's true, office buildings selling for 20 cents on the dollar, that doesn't mean there's not issues across multifamily.
Well, but the other thing that, of course, is the increase in expenses. Forget just rents not going up.
I didn't even get to that.
Yeah, to get on top of increased debt service, but insurance is through the roof. Tax is also going up. Maintenance costs. I mean, everything has gone up. And then there's this. We chatted about this briefly as well. It's the interest rate lag. In unison or in combination with regulator encouragement to encouraging banks to work with borrowers. The sense that I get of that is that the downturn is inevitable, but what regulators are trying to do they're trying to flatten the pace at which the downturn hits. Instead of insisting that banks mark everything down to market, which would take us off a cliff. Oh, yeah. This is just slowing the process, but it's like a slow-moving train wreck. It's inevitable.
It's coming. It's gonna happen. I think their regulators are trying to learn, like you said, from last time. We were both in real estate in the GFC and on the .com. So I totally agree with that's what's happening, but you can only hold off for so long here. But then one other quick point on the expenses. I just want to echo what you said on that. If I told you how much time we've spent talking about insurance over the last however many months here, I had an investor ask me on a call today about the tax situation, because what's happening in hot markets like Texas, where you can mark the value of real estate to market for your assessed value that determines how much you pay in property taxes. It's not like California, where the increases to your assessed value are capped at around 2%. There are some massive increases that are happening in Texas and what happens is all of a sudden If that happens, your cash flow falls off a cliff. You did not underwrite for that and have the cash on hand. It's more of the wild, wild west in Texas.
Yeah, I mean, there's somebody, I think one of my accountants some years ago said, yes, whatever the IRS giveth, it taketh away, right? So, all right, you don't have income taxes in Texas, but if you own property, you're paying vastly more on property tax. Even your home is, you're paying vastly more. I know my parents-in-law, yeah, they live in Texas, and there's like every year, and the people have had entire careers negotiating with the city to reduce taxes.
The process that we go through owning properties in Texas is so different in California. You have to formally sue, and then everyone has to hire a consultant, and there's this whole negotiation. And when we underwrite deals in our financial models, you can't predict every single scenario. So it goes back to being conservative with realistic assumptions and thinking about how the assessed value might move.
So this idea, sorry, just as we start to wrap up, my mind is kind of jumping around, getting off taxes. This idea that multifamily is in peril, you know, you and I have seen this. Sponsors who clearly have significant problems with one asset still raising money for new deals. It's mind-blowing. As an investor, you've just got to be so very, very careful where you're putting your money. And I think that if we were to leave today's show with one key word that is, to me, definitive of where we are today, patience. You've got to have patience. Don't rush in. Be patient. It's like you have this anxiety, right? To protect your investment, you also want to invest. We got a long way yet to go.
Yeah, you got to be careful. And I think we talked about this a few times, is think about every single risk and then another 10. And everywhere your deal can go wrong or investment can go wrong, and ask the sponsor. Or if you're doing a personal investment in real estate, think about how you can mitigate those risks, and the likelihood that you'll exceed your expectations is much higher than that you're going to go way below them, I guess.
Right. Let's wrap up.
All right.
I'm just trying to keep it to 30 minutes, you know, just because it's like this idea of a commute. Plus, anyway, I've got a call at the top of the
hour.
Yeah. So let's wrap up there. Thank you so much, Dave. It's always good to see you. I really enjoy our conversations.
Yes, I love them.
And I enjoy preparing for them as well, actually, putting these things together. And really
very good at the preparation and the technology, I must say.
And then taking a deep dive into these articles and these ideas. It's really it's fun and interesting. And dear viewers, I really hope you're enjoying these calls with Dave as well. Every Friday at noon. This is our first time to go live successfully on YouTube. I don't exactly know what channel I'm on. I'm on the right channel, at least. Took me a while to figure that out. Unfortunately, you can't leave comments. It says comments are not supported on private videos. I guess that's because we came through Zoom. But if you do have comments, do please put them in the comment section on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/GowerCrowd. And Dave and I will take a look at those, and we'll definitely get back to you. Or feel free also to what's it called? Ping us. That's the wrong word. Tag us on LinkedIn as well if you've got any thoughts. And I'm going to try and do the same with some of the people and articles that we mentioned today. We will be back next. Well, yes, one more thing. If you have not yet subscribed to the Gower Crowd newsletter, please go to gowercrowd.com and go ahead. There's a big red subscribe button there on the website. Click that and go to the podcast page. I've got links to Dave and to Calvera Partners. You can find out more about him there. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Adam Gower and my guest, Dave Calvera, today. Signing off. We'll see you next week.